The universe had always been a mystery, one that humanity had only begun to scratch the surface of. For centuries, the notion of extraterrestrial life was relegated to the realms of fiction, myth, and speculation. But in 2045, that fragile veil of uncertainty was shattered. Dr. Lena Forsyth, lead researcher at the United Earth Coalition's High Command, sat in her dimly lit office, a place that had become more of a sanctuary than a workplace over the years. She had always found solace in the numbers, in the calculations, and in the profound quietude that came with observing the stars. The hum of machinery and the soft clicking of keys as she worked on the data streams had become a constant part of her life. But tonight was different. Lena's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her eyes fixed on the screen that presented an ongoing scan of the far reaches of the universe. The UEC's Deep Space Listening Array, an array of satellites that circled the far edges of the solar system, was built to monitor any anomalous signals or signs of intelligent life. It had been in operation for decades, and though there had been many false alarms and meaningless blips, Lena had always hoped that one day something real would emerge. And then it happened. A small, insignificant signal, so weak that it could have been dismissed as just another bit of cosmic background noise, flickered into existence. Lena's instincts kicked in immediately. She paused, leaning forward as her eyes widened. The signal was structured. It wasn't random. It had a pattern. She tapped a few commands, isolating the frequency and zooming in on the anomaly. The signal pulse came in short bursts, each one followed by a brief pause like a heartbeat. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she ran the analysis. The source of the signal was not within the solar system. In fact, it was far beyond it, near the outer edges of the Oort cloud. For several moments she simply stared at the data in disbelief. The signal's mathematical structure was too deliberate, too patterned to be random. This was no natural phenomenon. It had to be a message. Her mind raced. Could this be the first proof that humanity was not alone? It was late in the evening when Lena made the decision to escalate the discovery. Her hands shook slightly as she typed out an encrypted message to UEC High Command, the same message she would soon send to every space agency on Earth. Urgent. Possible extraterrestrial signal detected. Pattern analysis in progress. Immediate attention required. She hit send, the weight of her decision settling over her like a thick fog. Lena knew what this could mean. She knew the potential consequences of a discovery like this, both exhilarating and terrifying. Her heart pounded in her chest, but there was no going back. Within minutes, Lena's screen flashed with an incoming call. It was from Dr. Michael Garrison, the head of UEC's Deep Space Research Division. He had received her report. Lena, Michael's voice crackled through the speaker, his tone taut with urgency. What have you found? I don't know yet, Michael, Lena replied, trying to steady her nerves. But I'm running an in-depth analysis now. The signal doesn't make sense. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. Michael was silent for a moment, then spoke again, his voice softer now. You're sure it's not a mistake? We've had plenty of false alarms. I know the difference, Michael, Lena responded, her voice steady. This is structured. It's too deliberate. Good. I'll assemble a team. We need to verify this, but you're right to escalate it. This could be the moment we've been waiting for. Lena felt a flicker of hope, followed immediately by an overwhelming sense of dread. What if this wasn't a friendly message? What if it was a warning? Or worse, a threat? The following days were a blur of activity. The entire UEC Research Division was mobilized to investigate the anomaly. Lena worked day and night, poring over the signal's composition, its intricacies, trying to piece together its meaning. But it wasn't until a week later that the first breakthrough came. The signal's encoding revealed an unmistakable pattern, one that resembled an advanced form of communication, almost like a code. And within that code were repeated sequences that hinted at an unmistakable message. The message, when fully decoded, was chilling in its simplicity. The Armada is coming. Prepare for extinction. The words were stark, clinical, as if they had been written for maximum impact. Lena's blood ran cold as she read them. The Armada. A force large enough to bring about extinction. She sat back, staring at the decoded message, trying to make sense of it. How did they know Earth existed? How had they found us, and why was this armada coming for Earth? Within hours, the UEC's Global Council convened an emergency session. Leaders from across the world, from every government and military faction, were briefed on the discovery. The implications were unimaginable. They had been broadcasting signals into space for years, sure, but they had never imagined they would be received, and by something that might be capable of wiping out humanity. The next few weeks saw frantic activity. Satellites were recalibrated, telescopes reoriented, and the world's top scientists began searching for any other signs of the Armada's approach. Earth's military leaders, who had long feared such a scenario, now began to formulate a plan for a defense, though they were uncertain of what they were defending against. After all, they had no idea how far away this Armada was, or how advanced their technology might be. But then, just as quickly as it began, the signal stopped. Silence. The pattern that had once pulsed across the UEC systems was gone. For 2 days, Lena worked tirelessly to confirm that the signal had ceased. Was this just a temporary pause, or had the Armada's forces already made their way to Earth? The thought left her uneasy, but there was no time to dwell on it. It was time to act. As humanity scrambled to prepare for an invasion, they received another transmission, this time in a different format, a burst of cryptic images flashing across the UEC's transmission screens. The images were blurry at first, but as the signal stabilized, it became clear what they were. The Armada. Massive ships, dark and menacing, floating in the void of space. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The scale was incomprehensible. Some were the size of moons, others larger than entire cities, their hulls shimmering with an otherworldly metallic sheen. And each one seemed to pulse with an ominous glow, as though they were alive, waiting. Lena and the team worked around the clock to analyze the images. They had no idea what these ships were capable of, but the sheer scale of the Armada was enough to send a wave of panic through Earth's governments. Humanity's defense systems were primitive in comparison. They weren't prepared for an assault from a fleet of ships that could easily wipe out entire cities with a single strike. As the days turned into weeks and the countdown to the Armada's arrival continued, Lena's fear grew. The question gnawed at her. What if they weren't coming to destroy Earth? What if they had come to enslave humanity? What if they were something far worse? A sense of urgency took hold of the entire world. No one was certain how the Armada would strike, or when they would arrive. All they knew was that time was running out. The UEC's global defense efforts were launched in earnest, and every nation on Earth threw its resources into preparing for war, though they were fighting an enemy whose weapons and technologies were beyond their wildest imaginations. The countdown clock ticked down relentlessly. 6 months, 5 months, 4. But something else happened that Lena hadn't expected. As the rest of the world scrambled to respond to the threat, she found herself in the midst of a personal revelation. Something in her gut told her that the Armada wasn't just coming for Earth. No, they were coming for something else, something far greater than just a planet. The strange, cryptic messages, the image of the ships, it all pointed to something more insidious, more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. And that revelation set her on a path that would lead to a discovery that could change the fate of humanity forever. The discovery of the signal that would forever change the course of human history rippled through the corridors of power like an unstoppable tide. It started with a single message, delivered to the United Earth Coalition's UEC High Command, that sent shockwaves through every government, every military, and every scientific institution on Earth. Editor Lena Forsyth, the lead researcher at the UEC's Deep Space Research Division, had done everything in her power to keep the situation under control. But with each passing hour, as more data poured in, it became increasingly impossible to contain the magnitude of what they had uncovered. The alien signal, a clear, deliberate transmission that arrived from the farthest reaches of space, had ceased its cryptic pulses, but the echoes of its ominous message reverberated across the globe. The Armada is coming. Prepare for extinction. Lena had never imagined that the quiet hum of her research lab would lead to something like this. As she sat at her desk staring at the vast array of screens displaying various decoded fragments of the signal, The weight of her discovery sank in deeper. The message wasn't just a warning, it was an unmistakable threat. Prepare for extinction. Her breath hitched as she ran her hand through her hair. The words kept replaying in her mind, each repetition driving home the terrifying reality that humanity's very existence was now at risk. What kind of force would dare to make such a claim? And what was this armada that they spoke of? For the past week, Lena and her team had been working tirelessly to understand the full implications of the transmission. The UEC's research division, along with a coalition of the world's top scientists, was scrambling to analyze every byte of data, every pattern, every symbol. But there was no answer, only more questions. The Armada, a name that seemed so casual yet so deeply menacing, loomed over them like a storm cloud ready to descend. It was during one of these long nights in the lab that Lena received a call. The voice on the other end was familiar, but this time it carried the tone of urgency that matched the gravity of the situation. "Lena, it's Michael," Dr. Michael Garrison, head of UEC's Deep Space Research Division, said, his voice tense. "I've been briefed on the decoded signal. I think it's time we escalate this to the Global Council." Lena swallowed hard. She knew what that meant. It was time to tell the world. It was time to make the full discovery public. "I agree," she said quietly, her voice betraying the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "The data is clear, Michael. They're coming." "Good. We'll need everything you've got. You've done more in the last few days than most teams do in a lifetime. But we need to understand what we're dealing with. I'll arrange a call with the council. We're going to need more eyes on this." The line clicked off and Lena stared at the screen for a moment. It was an odd sensation knowing that her research had reached a critical point. A part of her wanted to turn away, to reject the implications of what they had discovered, but she couldn't. She couldn't ignore the reality any longer. The UEC Global Council convened 2 hours later. Across the world, heads of state, military leaders, and the brightest scientific minds gathered virtually, their faces glowing on the screen in front of Lena. It was a surreal experience, one that would have seemed improbable even just weeks ago. The room fell silent as Michael Garrison introduced Lena and her team, and she stepped forward to present the data they had uncovered. Lena cleared her throat and began her briefing, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the podium as she addressed the council. "We've confirmed that the signal we intercepted originated from deep space," she said, her voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. "It came from beyond the Oort cloud, far beyond where we have previously detected any signals from extraterrestrial sources. This is not a random signal. It's a calculated transmission, carefully structured." A murmur rippled through the council. "We have decoded part of the message, though not all of it. We believe that what we have uncovered is just the beginning. What we've been able to translate is, in essence, a warning. The Armada is coming. Prepare for extinction." A wave of disbelief swept through the room. The faces on the screen reflected a mix of confusion, fear, and incredulity. The silence was deafening. "Armada?" The voice of General Derek Klein, one of Earth's leading military strategists, cut through the stillness. His brow was furrowed. "What does that even mean? An invasion?" "It's hard to say," Lena replied, maintaining her composure. "The signal doesn't offer specifics. But the sheer force behind the message implies something monumental, something that is capable of reaching across the stars with the intent to destroy." Another voice, that of Dr. Catherine Azar, a renowned astrophysicist, spoke up. "Lena, if this armada is as vast as we suspect, why haven't we detected them before? Why hasn't this been intercepted sooner?" Lena hesitated, glancing at the data on her screen. "We don't know. The signal may have been sent far in advance. It's possible that they've been monitoring us for a long time, just waiting for the right moment to strike. The conversation spiraled quickly into questions and theories. It wasn't just about understanding the enemy anymore. It was about how to defend against something that was potentially more powerful than anything Earth had ever known. There were no easy answers. Military defenses, already stretched thin, were woefully inadequate for facing an unknown threat of this magnitude. The world's combined space fleet and impressive collection of ships and stations was no match for an enemy capable of traversing the vast distances between stars. "Lena, what about countermeasures?" General Klein asked, his voice sharper now. "Can we protect ourselves? Do we have anything that could defend Earth against this armada?" "I don't know, General," Lena admitted, her heart sinking as she spoke. "What we know is that we're dealing with something far beyond our technology. We don't even know how fast these ships are or how far out they are, but we need to prepare for the worst." The council fell into a tense silence as the weight of Lena's words sunk in. It was a sobering reality, one that no one had been prepared for. Humanity had always prided itself on its technological prowess, but in the face of a threat like this, all of that seemed insignificant. How could Earth fight something it couldn't even comprehend? That evening, as Lena walked through the halls of the UEC's headquarters, she felt the eyes of her colleagues on her. The air in the building seemed thick with unease. There was an unspoken understanding that nothing would ever be the same. Earth's days of exploring space, of reaching for the stars, had just been overshadowed by a much darker reality. The signal was not a singular event. The moment the transmission had been detected, the global networks had begun to analyze every data stream, every signal from space. Now, every spacefaring nation was on high alert, pooling resources and preparing for what might be a confrontation on an unimaginable scale. Lena entered her office, her eyes red from exhaustion. She sat at her desk, staring at the map of the solar system. Her fingers traced along the projection, zooming in on the coordinates where the signal had originated. Far beyond Neptune, beyond Pluto, in the cold expanse of the Kuiper Belt, the Armada had been waiting, silently observing. And now they were coming. In the following days, the UEC deployed every available resource into investigating the signal further. Every telescope was refocused, every satellite reoriented, but despite their best efforts, no additional messages came. The signal had stopped, leaving humanity with only the cryptic warning. Meanwhile, global leaders began preparing for the worst. The United States, China, Russia, the European Union, all the major powers, had already begun work on a unified defense strategy. But it wasn't enough. Humanity was ill-prepared to face a threat that had been crafted in the depths of the cosmos. Lena's thoughts often returned to the cryptic message, "Prepare for extinction." It gnawed at her. Why would they make such a stark statement? Was it a threat, or simply an inevitability? The questions piled up, and with each passing hour her mind raced to find an answer. She knew that Earth had only one option: to prepare for whatever the Armada had in store, even if they didn't know what that would look like. As the days turned into weeks, the countdown to the Armada's arrival continued, relentless and inescapable. The days bled into each other, indistinguishable from one another in their frenetic pace. Since the UEC had received the first message from the distant Armada, everything had changed. Scientists, engineers, military strategists, and government officials, everyone had come to the same grim conclusion. Earth was about to face an unprecedented threat. And no one knew what that threat might entail. The signal had been clear, the message undeniable: prepare for extinction. But behind the cryptic words lay a terrifying unknown. The question that haunted everyone's thoughts was simple: how would the Armada strike? For Lena Forsythe, the weight of the unknown was becoming unbearable. She had dedicated her life to the pursuit of knowledge, to uncovering the mysteries of the universe, but now the discovery that should have been the pinnacle of human achievement had turned into a nightmare. The full extent of the threat was still unclear, but the mounting pressure to understand what lay ahead consumed her every waking moment. Every day brought new developments. Satellite scans from all over the world fed into the UEC's central command, offering glimpses of distant galaxies, but there was no sign of the Armada. The unsettling silence from deep space, punctuated only by the eerie absence of further signals, made it impossible to gauge how much time Earth had left. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was approaching, something far worse than they could imagine. The knowledge that the Armada's fleet was likely moving closer, perhaps as she sat here in this very office, gnawed at her every moment. The unknown, the lack of information, had made the situation all the more dangerous. No one knew how long they had until the fleet arrived, or how they would even detect it. The military had mobilized its forces, though the efforts had been largely symbolic. The ships, weapons, and technologies they had at their disposal were powerful but outdated compared to the unknown forces the Armada represented. Most of the world's best scientists and engineers were now tasked with finding something, anything, that could give humanity a fighting chance. But as the days went on, the military began to realize that they were preparing for a war against an invisible, unknowable enemy. Lena sat at her desk late one evening, sifting through the endless streams of data. The world was watching now, and the pressure was mounting. The global leaders were demanding more, faster results. The UEC had been forced to release public statements every few days, informing the world that the Armada was still coming. But there were no answers, no clarity, only the lingering fear of what might happen next. Her screen blinked to life, a new notification from the Central Command. It was from Michael Garrison. Urgent, new development in the signal, immediate meeting. Lena's pulse quickened. The signal had stopped a week ago. What new development could there possibly be? When she entered the UEC's war room, the atmosphere was tense. Several senior figures, including military leaders and top-tier scientists, were already gathered around a large holographic table in the center of the room. The digital projections floating above the table displayed models of Earth, Mars, and the outer solar system. Michael stood by the table, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a sharp intensity. He looked up as Lena approached, giving her a curt nod. "Lena, we've just received a new transmission," Michael said, his voice tight with urgency. "From the Armada?" Lena asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Yes," Michael replied. "But this one is different. It's not a message, it's something else." Lena's eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic projection. A new image appeared on the table, a spherical object, dark and ominous, floating in deep space. It was a ship, larger than anything humanity had ever constructed, with strange markings running along its surface. It was a visual representation of the first tangible sign that the Armada had arrived. The projection flickered and Michael gestured for Lena to examine the data. "We're not sure how to interpret it yet," he said, "but it seems to be some sort of probe, sent ahead of the main fleet, maybe to scout out Earth." Lena leaned in closer. The object was impossibly vast, far larger than even the largest space station humanity had ever built. The image was grainy, the object barely visible against the backdrop of the void, but it was unmistakable. A probe. A scout. "How far is it from Earth?" Lena asked, her voice strained. "About 12 light days. It's in the outer edges of the Oort cloud, but it's moving inward. It'll be here in a few weeks. We believe it's transmitting data back to the Armada," Michael said. "It's hard to make out the exact details, but we're analyzing the signals now." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. The message had been clear. The Armada was on its way. But this was something else. The Armada wasn't just waiting to strike. They were already testing their reach. This probe, this harbinger, was the first physical sign that they were not only aware of Earth's existence, but actively preparing for it. The room fell into an uneasy silence as the implications set in. If this probe was scouting Earth, the Armada wasn't just coming to destroy. They were preparing for something far more strategic. "What do we do now?" asked General Klein, his voice gruff. "We have to assume they're coming in force. What kind of defenses can we muster?" "We don't know yet," Lena said softly. "But I'll tell you one thing. It won't be enough." The days that followed were filled with chaos. The UEC ordered the rapid construction of several new space stations and defense platforms, while humanity's best minds worked together to decode every fragment of the probe's signal. The world's armies and fleets readied themselves, gathering in the asteroid belt for the first phase of Earth's defense. However, a growing sense of despair loomed over everything. As Earth scrambled to prepare, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were all moving too slowly. Despite their efforts, there was no real understanding of the enemy. There were no weapons that could match what the Armada might bring. Even the most powerful weapons humanity possessed, atomic bombs, nuclear warheads, were rendered meaningless in the face of the unknown. The mysterious alien probe continued its slow march inward, its transmission signals growing more frequent and more complex. Earth systems were catching more data, and yet no one was able to decipher what it all meant. A few days later, Lena stood in the UEC's central command room, staring at a new image transmitted by the probe. It was an image of Earth, though distorted, a rendering of the planet, overlaid with grid lines and strange symbols flashed on the screen. It was a map of the Earth, or at least an approximation of it, but the significance of the map was lost on them. None of the symbols made sense. "Is it a blueprint?" Michael asked, his voice filled with equal parts curiosity and dread. "Possibly," Lena replied, "but it's not like any blueprint we've seen. These aren't coordinates, they're patterns. Encrypted data, we're still trying to break it down." "What do you think it means?" Michael pressed. Lena looked at the symbols, the distorted image of Earth, and the slow-motion unfolding of the Alien Armada's plans. She didn't know what it meant, but the answer lingered just out of reach, like a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I don't know yet, but I'm afraid it's only the beginning." In the days that followed, the tension in the global command center was palpable. It wasn't just the military forces who were preparing for war. Scientists, engineers, and strategists from every corner of the Earth were scrambling to uncover the truth. What did the symbols mean? What did the probe's signals reveal? Every answer seemed to lead to more questions, and the clock was ticking down relentlessly. Lena sat in her office late one evening, staring at the various models and projections. Earth's planetary defenses were a distant hope, and the world's fleets could only provide a semblance of resistance. They didn't stand a chance against the overwhelming force of the Armada. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden message that flashed onto her screen. Encrypted message from unknown source. Lena's heart skipped a beat. It was the first transmission in weeks from an unknown source. Not just the Armada's probe, but from another alien ship, or perhaps even a communication network set up by the invaders. The message was cryptic but direct. "We are closer than you think. Your extinction is inevitable." Lena's hand trembled as she clicked the message open. The words burned into her mind as the truth of what was coming crashed over her like a tidal wave. Earth had no time left. The Armada wasn't just coming, they had already arrived.